Good afternoon, everyone. This is the Civic Works Committee, the 14th meeting of it. The City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for council, standing or advisory committee meetings, and information upon request. To make request of any city service, please contact accessibility@london.ca or 519-661-2489, extension 2425. To make a request specific to this meeting, please contact cwc@london.ca. I will make committee members aware that we do have quorum. We are just waiting for Councillor Turner and the mayor to join us. And joining me in chambers today, I do have Councillor Cassidy. We have some guests joining us as well, and they're always welcome to participate as we go. Looking to committee for disclosures of pecuniary interest. Thank you, and to committee, it helps if your screens are on so I know I'm not alone and I don't look at just one big face of me, which is always appreciated. Okay, seeing none, we have 7 items on our consent agenda. Would anyone like anything pulled and dealt with separate? Sorry, just Councillor Turner's joining us and just trying to connect. We'll give him a moment. Perfect. Welcome, Councillor Turner. And all consent items, we're just asking if we would like anything dealt with separately, as there are 7 items.
If I might, 2.7.
Okay, we're just gonna wait one moment as the mayor's just connecting.
He has connected. Thank you all.
Perfect, Mr. Mayor, welcome. We have consent items. We've done disclosure of pecuniary interest. Did you have any?
I have none.
Perfect. And we have 7 consent items. Item 2.7 has been pulled. Would you like anything else pulled? No.
No, thank you.
Perfect. Councillor Cassidy.
I would pull 2.3, Madam Chair, please.
So I would look for a mover and a seconder of items 2.1 through to 2.7, excluding number 2.3 and 2.7. Moved by Councillor Van Meerbergen, seconded by Councillor Turner. Opening it up for a speakers list now for the items that have been put on the floor. My speakers list will commence with Councillor Cassidy, and sorry, I'm a little bit used to being alone in the chambers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, it's, in this situation, I can give you a little psst and you look, so that's all good. I just wanted to comment on 2.1, Innovation Park Phase 5 Design and Tendering and Appointment of Consulting Engineers. Just happy to see this going forward, and really happy to see our industrial land being so much in demand, and seeing all of the wonderful businesses that are looking to London for expansion or investment. It says great things about the state of our economy here in London. So just happy for that, and thank you to staff for bringing that.
Okay, looking to committee for any other further question or comments. I will just note as well that everything under the amendments for traffic and parking bylaw, everything was normal in there. In item 2.6, there was 1 successful bidder that came actually in below budget, which is always nice to see. So having had a mover and a seconder, I will now call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. Item 2.3, Dundas Place Temporary Traffic Diversion Monitoring and Consultation. Mr. McCrae is with us to answer any questions or comments. And there is also in the agenda correspondence from London Cycle Link. Opening it up for questions or comments from committee, and I will commence with Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is about the construction downtown. As construction season comes to an end, and so work will not be continuing through that season, will those roads that are currently shut down continue to be completely shut down to traffic even though construction can't continue? Or will there be some sort of temporary remedial work done to allow traffic to go through those construction zones? Just wondering what happens once we're in the midst of winter.
Thank you for that, and I'll go to Mr. McCray.
Thank you, through the chair. If I could clarify, and maybe I'll queue up Jenny Dan to talk about the construction staging, but is the question related to the construction projects that are currently underway in the core and the sort of wrapping them up or their status through the winter months?
Yes, thank you, through you, Madam Chair. That, and just sort of wondering if all of the traffic will be on Dundas throughout the winter months, or will there be some sort of ability for some traffic to go in the areas where they currently can't go?
I see, yeah, Jenny Dan can elaborate, but essentially towards the end of the year, so later next month, King Street will be reopened to traffic. So at that time, there will be additional opportunities for east-west travel, eastbound travel in the core. But as far as it relates to Dundas Street in particular, the construction mitigation, the traffic diversion arrangement that was put in place for the construction season, it would be, or is planned to be removed based on the bylaws previously passed by council. And so it would be another east and west connection direct from Riverside and also Wellington east of downtown. So those requirements to turn at Rideout Street and at Wellington Street would be removed for the winter months.
Okay, Councillor.
Thank you for that information. My other question is around cycling on Dundas as it happened throughout the summer with the diversion of traffic. I wonder if there were counts done. I know we had counters on the temporary lanes on King Street, and we were able to have a really good idea of how much cycling was increased on that cycle path. So I'm wondering if there were counts done on Dundas during this time period where traffic was diverted.
Mr. McCray?
Yeah, thank you, through the chair. It's a great question. So in the report under the monitoring section 3.1, there's a graph that shows the sort of ongoing counts that were taken throughout the construction season, and the dark dashed line is the amount of cyclists on the corridor, and the results are generally between around 350 cyclists per day. It also shows the pedestrian counts, and pedestrians are something that were quite I guess reassuring as COVID restrictions eased and Dundas Place was more programmed and inviting space. The pedestrian counts identified pedestrians of over 3,000 and up and over 4,000 for one of the counts.
Councillor.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair, to Mr. McCray. I'm sorry for asking an obvious question, but I think it's important information for people to know about how well used that was. And I believe it might have been greater than some of the protected lanes that we have, but I also think that is an indication that cycling is increasing in the city, and cycling will continue to increase when we provide safe opportunities for people to cycle in the city and choose cycling as a viable transportation option in the city. So I'm supportive of the staff recommendation here. I pulled it because I had the questions, but I also pulled it thinking, giving the rest of my committee members an opportunity to perhaps propose something different if that was what they wanted to do. But I'm I'm happy with this report and happy to support the staff recommendation. And I will move that, actually, Madam Chair.
Okay, perfect. So we have a mover and Councillor Cassidy. Looking to committee for a seconder. Seconded by Councillor Turner. Looking to committee to see if there's any further questions or comments on this.
Sorry.
Yep, Mr. Mayor, go ahead.
Yes, sorry. I'm trying to understand what's different. I heard Councillor Cassidy say she was moving and it being seconded, but if this is the staff recommendation, it's already been put on the floor by you, notwithstanding the fact that it's pulled. So what is Councillor Cassidy changing? Just so it's clear to me. Chair?
Sorry, yeah, just one moment. We're having, one moment. And Councillor Cassidy had changed nothing.
So it's already on the floor, not requiring a mover and a seconder, as well intended as and eager as we all are. Okay, just wanted to be sure.
Okay, I'll turn to the committee clerk.
Through you, Madam Chair, the item has been pulled, so we need a mover and a seconder for staff's recommendation.
So can I challenge the clerk? Excuse me, I don't normally ever do that. That's weird. But this was put in good faith on the floor by the whole report, pulled by a member, which I get. Normally we pull it because we're going to vote something differently, but the fact that it's been pulled doesn't mean it hasn't been put on the floor by the chair. So I'm just a little curious, and I say that with the deepest of respect to clerks.
Yep.
Just procedurally, because the reason I'm making this at all an issue, Chair, is that normally we pull something because we want to vote on it separately, because there's something different we want to do with it. Because if all we want to do is comment, then as Councillor Cassidy's done, and thoughtful comments, they could do that, and it doesn't have to be pulled to do that. So hence when I chair my meetings, I ask if anyone wants to vote on it separately. So I'd love the clerk's interpretation, please.
Perfect. Thank you for that. And I will turn to Ms. Barb Westlake Powers.
Thank you. I'd just like to reiterate what the committee clerk has advised. It has been pulled and there was a separate vote on the consent agenda. So this does require a second mover and a seconder and a separate vote because it was pulled off the consent.
So Chair, through you, as a point of clarification for my understanding, because this will impact any of our meetings, if you were to put it back on the floor after it's been pulled, would it then still require a seconder?
If I may, sorry, yes, through the chair. Once it's pulled off consent, the consent agenda is voted on without this item, so it does require a separate mover and seconder.
And with apologies to the clerks, the chair, to Ms. Cassidy and Councillor Turner, to all of you. That's a long list.
Your worship, I believe you said Ms. Cassidy instead of Councillor Cassidy, just for clarification and procedure.
Since we're doing very procedural things, Councillor Cassidy, my apology to you too.
Thank you, your worship. I've seen that Councillor Turner's hand has gone down. If there's no more questions or comments in regards to item 2.3, it has been duly moved and seconded, and I will call the question.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
The final item under consent is item 2.7, the Meadow Lily Road Environmental Assessment and Servicing Study. This one was pulled by Councillor Turner, so I will start with Councillor Turner to see if he has questions or comments or an alternate motion.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And to Mayor's last point, sometimes there are items on the agenda that we might go in a different direction depending on what the answers are. And so it's prudent for us to pull those from being passed with the bulk of the consent items. This is one of those. My question through you, Madam Chair, to staff is with respect to the proponent that's being identified for selection here. My understanding is that this firm may also be doing the consulting for specific developments on 129 and 179 Meadow Lily Road. That might put them in a position of conflict as they're representing an applicant in a development file, and the city is looking to do the servicing study. I'm not sure if there are safeguards in the conflict concerns or how we address those things. So perhaps through you to staff.
Perfect. Thank you. My go-to on this one was Mr. Mathers. If that is not the case for this particular question, please advise.
Through the chair, that was not something that we were aware of. It's typical that many of these firms, we have dealt with a lot of firms that have done EA work and then also do consulting work for developers as well. And they will have within their organization, like a separation. It's very common from a lot of the development, a lot of the consultants we work with, for example, like a Stantec has a large body that within their organization that does development work, but also does a number of EAs for the city. So prior to council, what we can do is just reconfirm that those safeguards are in place, if that's something that council wishes us to confirm, and I can provide a memo back to the Civic Works Committee's members if they'd like to see that. So that would just involve us going back to the consultant and just confirming that's in place. But that is the norm with many different consulting organizations.
Perfect. Councillor Turner, are you content with that clarification from staff?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, to Mr. Mathers, thank you. That's helpful. I think it'd be really important that if we are to execute the contract, that we're assured that that such firewalls and safeguards are in place.
Okay, thank you for that. And we will hear back with that confirmation prior to council to make sure that we met all requirements and safeguards. Is there any other further questions or comments in regards to item 2.7? Seeing none, I will require a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Cassidy, seconded by Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Okay. We will now call the question.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. We have no scheduled items. Under items for direction, we do have two. So for item 4.1, staff is asking specifically of things from us and of council. So if committee will indulge, we will go to staff first to hear exactly what kind of feedback they're looking for from us in regards to the draft vision before they go to public consultation.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. It is my pleasure to bring to you what will be the first of many reports related to the Mobility Master Plan. So I appreciate committee indulging me while I do a bit of an introduction as to where we are and where we're going next. The Mobility Master Plan will be looking at transportation mobility projects, policies, and programs to serve us over the next 25 years. And during this process, we will need to be thinking about the London of tomorrow. So a London that is working towards net zero emissions, that is resilient to climate change, that is experiencing substantial population growth and changing demographics and needs. And today's report outlines some guiding draft principles or underlying values and a vision statement that with community input is going to help us be aligned at council, with the public, with our stakeholders, and with our own staff throughout the organization as we explore solutions and make decisions about our mobility in the city. The report also covers our proposed approach to public engagement and provides an overview of the necessary considerations with respect to engaging stakeholders as we work towards acquiring a consultant to assist us in developing the plan. The plan is going to take approximately 2.5 years to do. It is a massive exercise in public policy and in city shaping. And the emphasis will be on building more sustainable mobility throughout the network. This will consider future growth and development, the mobility infrastructure necessary to support us, the need to leverage senior government funding, capital projects, programs, and plans, and ensuring that we're doing all of these things in the context of a diverse and growing community. So a really big undertaking. We're really grateful to have almost 40 people from across all city services supporting this work. And we will be expanding the team outside of the city's internal resources with a community advisory panel and community connectors starting quite soon. Some of our most critical challenges through this process will be accommodating a growing population of up to about 139,000 people over the next 2 decades. creating a safer city for women and girls who we know commonly can experience violence or other unwanted behaviors in transition from one place to another, creatively managing congestion and increasing capacity sustainably and cost effectively, evaluating the post-pandemic impacts on our mobility patterns. This is where the crystal ball would be really helpful right now, but seeing what a post-COVID city and a post-COVID workplace looks like, and reaching as many Londoners as possible to ensure that everyone's unique mobility needs are well reflected in the Mobility Master Plan. And finally, we'd be remiss not to mention this is being done in the context of an issue facing all of us and top of mind and top of the news cycle right now with the conference in Scotland, which is climate change. Even with pandemic impacts, transportation is still 41% of all greenhouse gas emissions here as of 2020. So important steps need to be taken if we're going to meet our greenhouse gas emission targets, achieve mobility equity, and accommodate a growing city, both in terms of population as well as economic development. We know Londoners can and want to be a part of the solution, but ultimately our mobility infrastructure is really important on how we live and how we are success within the city. So it will require some time, some innovative thinking, and lots of conversations with the community as well as our elected officials. So you will be seeing steps along this process from us regularly. So this is going to be a journey that lets us learn about the London we all want together over the next 25 years, think holistically about our mobility needs, and have informed and probably sometimes lively discussions about those priorities. So we're hoping that this will result in a plan that serves us now and serves us for generations to come. And we're seeking your endorsement of the draft vision and guiding principles that we can start having communication and consultation with the community about them. Thanks, and we've got our team here to help answer any questions.
Perfect. Thank you for that overview, as this is an instrumental plan helping shape London for the next 25 years. I will start a speakers list of those who wish to make comment or feedback, as this is what staff is asking of us. For those who are guests at committee, I'd also like to specifically welcome Councillor John Fife Miller to committee, and he is most welcome at any point as well to participate along the way. So looking to committee or visiting guests if they would like to make comment on item 4.1. I will commence with Councillor Cassidy, followed by Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just want to say thank you for staff for bringing this forward. I'm really excited about the priorities that are laid out in the plan, and I'm really happy to see this this move forward. It's I mentioned this the last time we talked about the upcoming mobility master plan, that the 2014 transportation master plan was the first time a transportation plan in the city even talked about other modes of transportation besides personal vehicles. So we're seeing how we are evolving in that transportation means how we move goods and people around the city in a holistic way, and not just about private vehicles with single passengers in those vehicles. So I'm happy to see these areas of focus, and I'm really looking forward to the final plan when it is finally complete. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Turner.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks to staff for kicking this off. I'm excited to see where this goes. A couple points that I noticed in here that would be really helpful. One is with respect to the guiding principles: environmentally sustainable, integrated, connected, financially sustainable, equitable, and healthy and safe. These are key touchstones that I think will be really important to help guide the process. I was trying to think if anything was missing in here, and nothing really jumped out at me, which is great. Another good principle in this talks about the spectrum of community engagement, and I'm happy to see this starting to show up in more reports. One of the challenges when we do community engagement is creating differing expectations between what we're consulting on and what the level of input would be. Sometimes we're telling people what we're doing. We might give a road closure notice, for example. Well, we've got to close the roads. We're telling people. Sometimes we're consulting to get information to help form the project. Other times we're engaging more directly. And sometimes we're doing direct empowerment, where residents get to make the decisions on what the outcomes will be. So especially with something like transportation, it would be really important and mobility that we're talking about how their input will inform this process and how much empowerment and agency they have through this. One question that I did have was there's a couple kind of contemporary concepts in transportation and mobility planning. One of them is AAA for like all ages and abilities in terms of creating infrastructure in that realm, and the other one is looking at the inverted traffic pyramid that takes a look at putting walking and running, for example, and pedestrian type activities at the top of that pyramid, and bringing car right down to the bottom of that pyramid. Are these kind of concepts that we would expect to see discussed and evaluated through the course of this this plan?
To staff?
Thank you. Yes, I can comment through the chair. Excellent comments from the councillor, and yes, those two concepts that you identify, the all ages and abilities, and that are inverted triangle, that's sort of puts a priority on transportation modes, are certainly two concepts that are embedded in what we're talking about here, and that we'll dig into deeper as we get into the plan creation and try to share more information with the public and get more detailed and thoughtful about how we identify different priorities through the different parts of the network.
Madam Chair, if you'll,
yep, go ahead.
Madam Chair, if you'll indulge me, I just wanted to say that we're really keen to have staff who are involved in accessibility and anti-racism, anti-oppression, and an age-friendly London, as well as things like neighborhood decision-making as part of the team as we go forward with the Mobility Master Plan. That's new for us in environment and infrastructure, and I think they'll bring a skill set and perspective that'll be extremely valuable as we make sure that equity and accessibility and safe infrastructure for all road users, including the perspective of the inverted pyramid, are built into the plan as it goes forward.
Perfect. Thank you. Councillor Turner, anything further?
Oh, that was answering my questions quite well. So thank you to both. And I'm looking forward to seeing this evolve as it moves through. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Looking to committee for further questions or to our guests, as I'm seeing no further hands at this time. Councillor Helmer.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask through the chair about the overall timeline. So in terms of what the community can expect in terms of engagement and how much time it's going to take to develop the mobility master plan. I wonder if Ms. Chair or somebody else on staff would like to just give us a broad overview of the timing.
Perfect. Thank you to staff for an overview of timing for rollout and engagement.
Madam Chair, the overall project is about 2.5 years back to final approval with council. So Mr. McCrae can probably divide that into slightly more granular sections that might be more helpful for Councillor Helmer.
Right. Mr. McCrae?
Yes, certainly, thanks. I'd be pleased to. The phases of engagement section of the report before committee describes sort of the process at a high level, and where we are currently kicking off phase 1, which is establishing that shared vision and understanding needs, and that will extend into the spring of next year. Phase 2 will then look at exploring solutions, making connections, so starting to look at different alternatives for the transportation programs, policies. That'll take us through to the end of next year and into early 2023. And then finally, phase 3 is sort of confirming, identifying preferred alternatives and the path forward, and finalizing the report. And the bulk of that work will occur in 2023. And we envision that the finalizing of reports and dotting all the I's, crossing the T's will occur in early 2024. So it's a lengthy process, but we feel the time is necessary to really engage and find, create good solutions. And just knowing the environmental, we're following the environmental assessment process here, and the thoroughness around it, and that is sort of the time and vision to get to the right conclusions and the proper finish line. Thank you.
Councillor Helmer?
Thanks very much. I just wanted to make sure that that was clear to folks who are interested in the mobility master plan, because it is a big undertaking. And just in terms of some comments, I wanted to say thanks very much to Ms. Grady and Ms. Fontaine, I think, who are the authors of the report. I think it is very well done in getting us on a good footing as we undertake what is going to be a very long and important project to kind of guide the development of hundreds of millions of dollars of spending out over the next 20-25 years. And for me, I think the 5 principles that are articulated are very good ones. The one that I think sometimes we don't talk about enough is the financial sustainability part. And it's really important that we're putting in transportation, mobility, infrastructure that is actually financially sustainable, not just in the immediate short term, but in the longer run. And that we're making the best use of the road network that we have, the active transportation network that we've got, so we can move the most people the safest and quickly throughout the city in the way that they want to move. And we're not spending much more money than we need to accomplish relatively small gains. So financial sustainability, I think, has got to be at the core of what we're doing in the mobility master plan. I'm glad to see that it's very clearly articulated as one of those 5 principles. And fortunately, it goes often very well hand in hand with environmental sustainability. You can make better use of money. You can also get better environmental outcomes. So I'm excited to see what comes of the work. And I want to say thanks for the work to get it to this point.
Thank you for those comments. Councillor Van Holst, welcome to committee, and please proceed.
Thank you. So my question for you or to staff through you is just about efficiency. I think people like to see an efficient transportation system. And where's that best reflected? Is that the integrated and connected? Where we would see that as a priority?
Thank you. Mr. McRae?
Thank you. I think it's certainly reflected in integrated and connected, also environmentally sustainable. We are, you're correct, striving for efficiencies, and that can have spin-off benefits that relate to levels of service, but also contributing to climate change goals and some of the other high priorities that we're looking for out of this master plan.
Oh, I see. So, and if I may, Madam Chair, through you, so the efficiency is related to environmental sustainability because people would be waiting less. They get to their destination sooner and burn less fossil fuels, if that's indeed the fuel that's being burned.
That was your question?
Yes. Is that what we mean by that?
Perfect. Thank you. Mr. McRae?
Yeah, there'd be efficiencies related to flow of traffic, but also encouraging and supporting different modes of travel. So we know that from a climate change perspective, active transportation and transit make good contributions. So efficiencies there. And I guess, if we're talking efficiencies, there's also, it also relates to financially sustainable, further to the previous comments by Councillor Helmer, in that, an efficient transportation system can make contributions on the balance sheet as well.
Thank you. Councillor Van Holst, are you satisfied?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I see no further hands. Oh, Councillor Van Bergen, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Is the audio coming through okay?
Perfectly.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to make the point, we're looking at...
Sorry, you need to face forward and we can hear you perfectly, but if you turn your head, we cannot.
Oh, all right.
Perfect.
I just wanted to make the point, as we move forward with this plan, moving towards our stated objectives and what we're trying to reach in terms of net zero, one of the biggest assistance that we can get is coming actually from the personal vehicle marketplace. Rapidly, the marketplace itself is changing the fossil burning vehicles into completely non-polluting, i.e. electrified vehicles. And it's happening at a rapid pace, and it will certainly be before 2050. And so I just think we have to keep this in mind and remember that we have to keep our road system up to snuff. We're looking, according to this report,
Face forward. We just missed that last line.
Okay, we're looking according to this report of an additional, perhaps 100,000 additional Londoners on top of what we have now. So the pressures will be intense. We have to remind ourselves that 90% of Londoners choose to move around with vehicles. And we have to keep that in mind, and also keep in mind that it's increasingly becoming more and more environmentally sustainable, and it will rapidly get us towards our goal because they will be non-polluting. So I have a question for staff, and that is, in this projected plan, has it been incorporated that vehicles will become increasingly non-polluting and very, in a reasonable amount of time, non-polluting? Is that incorporated in the thought? And is there a dedication to making sure that we keep our road system viable for Londoners to move around our city?
Perfect. Thank you. Mr. McRae.
Oh, Madam Chair, I certainly can start with that. Certainly, evolving vehicle technology, including connected and autonomous vehicles, as well as low pollution or no pollution vehicles, will be part of the discussion as we plan both our road system as well as the climate emergency action plan. There are actually indeed some pollutant effects as a result of low pollutant vehicles. For example, hydrogen cells right now use fossil fuels to create the hydrogen that's in them. And we are seeing some increased recarbonization of our electrical grid system. But that said, we do have a team that works on emerging vehicle technology, and that will be things that we consider as this plan proceeds. We know that a transport mobility master plan does need to consider the use of the personal automobile vehicle. I think what's different here is that plans in the past have focused almost entirely on that. And this does look at other modes that other road users may choose to use, but it does not do that without considering the need for passenger vehicles, personal passenger vehicles within that context.
Okay. Councillor Van Merbergen, a follow-up comment, question?
No, I appreciate that that response. I think it serves us well to remind ourselves that London is a congested city. Our road system is not currently up to snuff, and we have to make sure that we have the vision to look forward for our city to properly grow internally, to move goods and people through vehicles. And I just want to make sure that we keep an eye to that fact as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Turner.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just quickly to point out and to bridge off of Ms. Scher's points, the impacts of cars go beyond the vehicle themselves in terms of carbon. The way we use our land, significant hardscaping, taking arable land out of production, all of those things, the way we build, and how close things are to each other. All of those things are significant impacts to our carbon emissions beyond just the vehicle's emissions itself. But as Ms. Scher correctly identified, energizing those vehicles requires some level of carbon as well. Ontario is getting close to a renewable grid, but it's not entirely there. We still have quite a bit of gas plant electricity generation here. So with all of that, I think it's really cautious, just a word of caution to let's not believe that just because the cars are not using gas anymore doesn't mean that they don't contribute to our greenhouse gas emissions.
Thank you. I'll recognize Mayor Holder.
Thanks very much. First, I will be supporting the report, but I do believe it's naive or even absurd to imagine that that we will be eliminating cars. So to the extent that I think Councillor Van Meerbergen is trying to make a point that we've got to find a way to find that appropriate accommodation. I think that's the right. Approach. I think imagining that that the world goes to zero because we wanted to listen. I just came back, Chair, from this morning from John Paul to secondary school, where in fact the technology that they put in place at the school itself is carbon neutral. And in light of what's going on and with the world leaders in Glasgow and trying to cope with this, we've got our own homegrown example of the first of its kind in the country of a system that's been put in place in a high school. Again, by the way, energized, forgive the word, but it's true, energized by the young children, by the students who really felt that it was important to make that statement. So I think it's how you try to find these balances and ultimately to do the right thing. But to imagine that that we're going to eliminate the car, no. To imagine that we can somehow limit the progress of alternate forms of transportation, that'd be naive. The trick's to find the balance. And I think the staff report goes some way in trying to look for all of that. So happy to go forward with it.
Thank you. Looking to committee and guest councillors for any further comments. Seeing none, I will need a mover and a seconder on this item. Moved by Councillor Turner, seconded by Councillor Helmer. Calling the question.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. Item 4.2 is the Warncliffe Road South Improvements 100 Stanley Street process. This is under items for direction. Looking to committee, if you would like a staff update on this first about the questions. Okay, I'm seeing some heads shaking all. So I will go to staff first to introduce this to us as there's a direction from staff in us, and then we can proceed with questions from committee and guests. So to staff for an overview of the report that's before us in regards to 100 Stanley Street.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe Mr. McRae and I hit our mute buttons at the same time. He looks like he's prepared to go, so he can start. And if I need to add anything to that, I certainly can.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Pleased to help. This is a report back from the previous direction that council provided back in March, I believe, where we were to review the impacts on the environmental assessment process with respect to the demolition of the house at 100 Stanley Street. So the main takeaway from this report is that an environmental assessment addendum is not required, and the report lays out the process with respect to obtaining the demolition permit and council's interactions on that process. With us today is Garfield Dales, who can speak in more detail to whatever questions committee may have.
Did Mr. Dale or Ms. Scher wish to add anything at this point before we open it up for questions from committee?
Madam Chair, I'm fine. Mr. McRae's synopsis is exactly where we are.
Thank you. So looking to committee members who wish to speak and or guests of committee. My speakers list will commence with Councillor Helmer.
Thank you. A couple of questions, but I wanted to just start with the sort of later part in the report where it's talking about the timing of the various works that are planned, not just this project, but some of the adjacent north-south routes. And I wonder if perhaps Mr. Dales or Mr. McRae would like to just address how the schedule of some of those things is being adjusted to try and avoid the problem of having too many things pinched off, too many north-south corridors pinched off at the same time. I remain fairly concerned about that, and I'm glad to see that the Victoria Bridge project can be brought ahead a little bit. I think that's good news. And I wonder if they would just address that, the overall timing, including, which will be important for people in the eastern part of the core, how this aligns with what's going on in Adelaide.
Thank you for that question. To staff?
Through the chair, I can start, and if Mr. Dale has anything to add, I'll kick it off. So yes, the councillor points out an important consideration, and whenever we construct infrastructure, we're cognizant of coordinating and scheduling the projects to minimize the impacts to the road users. We have somewhat of a conundrum here for north-south routes in the Warncliffe Wellington Road area, and so this section tries to provide some clarity in how we're juggling those priorities and trying to stagger the major impacts, at least those parts of those projects that will impact road users. So yes, the Victoria Bridge replacement project is essentially shovel ready. And so we are moving it forward and aim to construct it probably in the 2022 year. So making progress on that component of the program where we can and getting that project out of the way. It will not be a signed detour route for impacts on Warncliffe or Wonderland, but it's understandable that it is an important question, and it provides an important connection across the river. And that project does require a removal of that bridge to motor vehicle traffic. That being said, it will have a temporary pedestrian connection across the river. So that project is being progressively, actively moved forward. The Warncliffe Road South improvements, so the grade separation that the Hunter Stanley Street property relates to, is a complex project, and there is a lot of interaction with the railway, and that is impacting the schedule somewhat, just with respect to coordination of impacts on the rail and rail outage timings and whatnot. And so there's a lot of work still to accomplish in the technical design side of that project. And so that combined with moving Victoria Bridge up means that the Warncliffe Road South project will, the major impacts will follow. It'll occur after the Victoria Bridge replacement project. And then the other piece of the puzzle that we're coordinating is the Wellington Gateway project and the reconstruction of the Clark's Bridge, which is Wellington Road over the Thames River. And the exact phasing of the entire Wellington corridor, Wellington Gateway project is still in flux, but the considerations for these other projects are informing that with an eye to trying to manage the impacts on that project in combination with the alternate routes. The councillor also specifically asked about the Adelaide Street underpass. It is moving forward. We're currently in the procurement phase for the contract, aim to bring a contractor on this summer. That project will provide a two-lane detour through the construction site, so it won't block the corridor for a long period of time, but there will be constraints and restrictions, and so the impacts of that project will begin to be felt predominantly in fall of 2022. I hope that helps.
Councillor Helmer, a follow-up, or if Mr. Dales want to add anything in? Mr. Dales, I'll ask you first if you want to add anything out, then I'll ask Councillor Helmer if you have any questions or follow-ups.
Thank you, Chair. No additional information. I think Mr. McRae covered it quite well.
Perfect. Councillor Helmer.
Thank you. That's, I think it's really helpful to kind of get the overall picture. I guess my concern is like what's the worst case scenario and how long is it going to last for. So I think maybe that's something we can work on in terms of the timing. I think it's a little bit up in the air right now, but if we're going to lose, say, 2 to 4 north-south lanes at the same time, 2 on Adelaide and then 2 somewhere else, that's where I think it starts to get really impactful generally for people trying to go north-south in that part of the city. And I know we're doing our best to try and avoid that, but that's where I'm trying to keep an eye on is when we're going to lose how many north-south lanes at the same time, because they're not full closures necessarily, but even the pinching is going to be felt very extensively. And if it's for months at the same time, I am worried about that. So I appreciate the answer, and I know it'll be refined as we get closer to implementation. Thank you.
Thank you. Looking for other councillors on this committee or visiting councillors who wish to make a comment or questions on this item. Okay, seeing none, I will ask Councillor Turner if he would take the chair for a moment. I would like to make a comment.
I have the chair, and I have a speakers list with you, Councillor Plosa.
Perfect. To committee members and to fellow colleagues, I did not support this throughout this entire process, nor at council. As a South London councillor, following up to the questions and answers that Councillor Helmer asked and staff gave, I am still concerned about these timelines and grateful that the Victoria Bridge replacement has been moved up as South Londoners try to access the core employment and other recreational activities. Within this report, next steps still include a review by the city's heritage planner, Latch, the Planning and Environment Committee, with a public participation meeting. I guess if people show up and say they would still prefer the house be moved at the PPMs, and if the city planner and Latch come back and say their preferred option is still what original staff option was to relocate the home, I have concerns about these timelines getting pushed back even further. Recognizing in the original staff report, this home was to be relocated across the street and that move to have been completed by fall of 2021. That home should already be done, and this should not be a conversation before us at this time. In speaking with staff beforehand, the demo timeline and the moving relocation and make ready timeline is still the same that would accommodate the move and the construction that would need to be done to see this vital, absolutely so vital, Warncliffe Road South improvements completed. They expect that the relocation costs that they gave us before are still the same, recognizing that yes, they are high, but I still think there's an opportunity to find a way forward in this together. For me, I'm still not okay with council's prior decisions, which is fine. I recognize it is the will of council. I know the moving relocation money is a lot, but for me, it also comes down to the timelines and with certainty that staff can move forward with the contracts to be put in place to assure that next year's construction timeline can be done on time and on budget, as this is a vital infrastructure project serving many Londoners as we emerge from the COVID pandemic. It's also providing many jobs that will be of great value to many people. So for me, I'm going to be voting no on this, as I'm still not okay with where we are. Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Councillor Pelosa. Would you like the chair back?
Yes, please.
It's all yours.
Thank you. Looking to other guests or committee members for questions or comments. Councillor Van Berbergen, please proceed.
Well, this recommendation from staff is certainly good news for London taxpayers. And I certainly want to congratulate staff for bringing this this motion forward, or this recommendation forward for us. And clearly, this is the direction that not only council wants to go in, but also our community as a whole. I would have to say 95% of the emails I get from constituents are saying, please don't spend $1 million on moving this house. So once again, thank you to staff.
Thank you. Looking for anyone else who wishes to make comments. Councillor Van Holst is next on my speakers list. Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll again certainly support the demolition when it comes forward because it's the cost-effective thing to do. I'm a little sad that again that Councillor Squire has left us. He and I were working with the heritage community on a strategy for heritage, and I think we need a way to maximize the benefits we get from heritage, or we need to maximize the heritage retention that we get versus the money we spend. And so, you know, this is a situation where it's $1 million extra, then we could get more by preserving heritage in other places, and this council has seen days where we've spent tremendous amounts of money in order to preserve various heritage structures. And so some kind of a fund, some kind of a strategy going forward, rather than the sort of the hit and miss as these projects come up. All of a sudden there's a heritage property that gains a great deal of focus and popularity just because it's in the spotlight, whereas there are other properties that would likely be better for saving. And so we need to keep that in mind. In this case, it's just not cost effective to save this property, and it's unfortunate that there wasn't another way to configure or deal with this bridge switching out. But you know, I think we're in a position now where really the demolition is our only viable choice. You know, I'd be happy to take the funds that would be remaining and put those into some other kind of heritage preservation. I know there's many possibilities, but we do have to look at the cost and benefit for any heritage preservation strategy that the city goes forward with. Thanks.
Thank you. Looking for any other questions or comments from committee or guests? Seeing none, this item will require a mover and a seconder to go with the administration's direction to submit an application to council to demolish the heritage designated property at 100 Stanley Street. Moved by Councillor Van Meerbergen, seconded by Mayor Holder. Calling the question.
Closing the vote, the motion is failed 3-3.
Perfect. This item will move forward to council then without an item, any for direction. That concludes our items for direction today. Under deferred matters and additional business, on your item report, there is a report from the Cycling Advisory Committee and the Transportation Advisory Committee. Both contain within it a request for Civic Administration to consider their feedback. And I do have one item I'd like to bring up for additional business. Okay, perfect. To keep things simple, it has been recommended that we deal with items 5.1 to 5.3 as reported on the agenda, and then I will bring up additional business. So looking for questions or comments for items 5.1 through 5.3, or a mover and a seconder for all three items. Moved by Councillor Turner, seconded by Councillor Cassidy. Looking for any further comments or questions? Seeing none, we will call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Perfect. I will ask Vice Chair Councillor Turner to take the chair for I can bring up additional business.
I have the chair, Councillor Pelosa.
Thank you. For additional business, members throughout our community has been raising the questions of the Blackfriars Bridge, as it's been announced that it will be reopening to vehicle traffic on the 8th as planned. This is in response to, originally it was closed underneath emergency orders due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The reopening is simply triggered by the course of action of reopening, and it wasn't a decision of council to open it nor close it. So before you today, I would like to bring forward concerns for the community who use active transportation and enjoy this network, who, though they don't need it for safe distancing per se at this point in the pandemic, they have found that they've come to appreciate it and use it, and it now connects to more active transportation trails throughout the area. So circulated to committee in advance was draft wording in regards to the Blackfriars Bridge. If you would indulge me, I will read it out, recognizing not all are aware of it and those viewing from home. That Civic Administration be directed to leave Blackfriars Bridge closed to vehicles and commence the review of its operations as required by the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks, including public consultation, and report back at a future meeting of Civic Works Committee. B, that Civic Administration be authorized to undertake all administrative acts necessary for the above action noted in Part A. And C, that it noted that the Civic Works Committee was made aware of the related online petition. This petition was from Chris DeGroot, who was a Cycling Advisory Committee member for the city. He has since submitted the hard copy of petition names, which amount to 650 people having already signed on in a matter of only a few days. As this bridge redevelopment was an issue of the prior council, part of its operation for a single lane was required by the ministry to be reviewed at a future point in time, asking council to leave it closed and for Civic Administration and staff to review those operations now as required by the ministry. Recognizing our direction today at council or at committee, if we pass this motion today at committee, the bridge would remain closed until a full discussion at council would direct it to be either opened or closed. For that way it wasn't open and then potentially closed a few days later to help residents understand the process. So, Mr. Chair, that is my motion. I will put it on the floor, and I do believe I have a seconder.
And
Councillor Cassidy.
Look for a seconder.
I will second that, Mr. Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Councillor Cassidy. I'll look for any discussion. Mayor Holder, and then Councillor Fife-Miller.
Well, we've done this before, Chair, where we've deferred to the local councillor, and so I'd certainly respect hearing Councillor Fife-Miller's thoughts first, if I could, noting that this was the very first act that this council did when Councillor Keabaga and I opened this bridge up, and we took the first vehicle across that bridge back in 2000 and oh my goodness, I want to say 18, but it was the very first act as a council that we did. But with your permission, I would like to hear from Councillor Fife Miller, and then I'm happy to come in.
Thank you, Mayor Holder. Councillor Fife Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I keep seeing an unsafe connection here. So please, if you would be so kind, if I drift out, would you kindly just give me a hand nod? I would really appreciate that. So thank you very much for this. I think going back to when the original decision was made to put traffic on the bridge, if I remember correctly, for council, there was an EA that was prepared. There was a lot of public input on the direction of how we wanted to move the bridge forward. And at the end, it was decided that there would be one-way traffic going east on Blackfriars. If I'm correct, if I remember, there was a plan that after there was a 5-year, there was going to be a 5-year window to get a feeling of the traffic patterns on Oxford, Riverside, and Blackfriars, and come back with a report just to give some feedback on the traffic. Was the bridge being overused and such? Needless to say, with COVID, that report, to my knowledge, hasn't been drafted and the bridge has been closed. I think part of the challenge here of what we're looking for, the answers we're looking for, are going to be difficult without the bridge being opened, because for the last 20 months it hasn't been. So I'm thinking that in order to get the information that we require, we need to be able to at least follow through with that process that was put in by council originally. And get the information we want in front of us to make a decision that works for all of the communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fife Miller, or Councillor Fife Miller. My apologies, Mayor Holder.
Thanks very much. I won't support the recommendation at this time, and I say it that way very mindfully and respectfully. When this was closed, there was it was by design to acknowledge that with COVID and with traffic as it was, that we needed to, it was felt that we needed to close the bridge. In fact, I wasn't particularly convinced at the time that that was the right way to go, but I respected the fact that during COVID that there was some desire. I always had a concern that this would be the ultimate objective, would be to make this a walking bridge and bicycle bridge versus automobiles. But historically, as we all know, notwithstanding some of the challenges that bridge has had over time, it has always been primarily an automobile bridge and then limited to one direction. And then ultimately, I thought, actually, with some really careful thought, trying to find a way to mesh pedestrian and bike traffic with the additional lanes that are on that are afforded on that bridge, and I thought that made the right balance. It feels premature to just simply shut this down to vehicular traffic. I have some thoughts as to why the motivation may well be there to do that, but I think more importantly, I think the intent is fair. I just don't agree with the recommendation as it stands. I will not be supporting closing the bridge to vehicular traffic, Chair.
Thank you, Your Worship. Before I go to Councillor Lewis, if I might just look to the committee members to see if there's any speakers that wish to speak. Okay, seeing none. Councillor Lewis, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. I am getting an unstable internet connection warning as well, so if I am choppy, I apologize for that. Just through you, a question to staff, actually, because I don't know, where I would stand on this. I see both sides of the argument, but through you to our staff, can we even conduct the review that's required by the Ministry of the Environment if we leave it closed? Like, it was my understanding that it would be looking at all modes of traffic use on the bridge and assessing its use fully that way. So I'm just wondering if we can actually deliver on the required study if we leave it closed at this time.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. I think I go to Mr. McCray.
Yes, thank you through the chair. Yeah, the requirement to assess the operation of the bridge was imposed by the Minister of the Environment upon assessing Part 2 order requests to the environmental assessment. It was not very detailed at all, and so it really leaves the scope open somewhat to the municipality to define. And so I would say that that process can be undertaken regardless of whether the bridge is reopened or remain closed.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have for now, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to ask that question of staff.
Great, thank you. Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. My question through you to our staff was in respect to the costs of the repairs. Now, I believe we repaired this bridge so that it would be vehicle worthy. If we had decided ahead of time that this was just going to be a pedestrian bridge, or for bicycles, would the costs have been less?
Mr. McCray.
The cost to the rehabilitation project back in 2018 would have been approximately the same, whether it was for vehicles or pedestrian usage. The load limits on the bridge, consistent with the previous light load limit, is actually somewhat similar to the pedestrian loads required by the bridge code. So essentially the project would have had to have proceeded with a similar scope, whether it was just a pedestrian bridge or a vehicle bridge.
Councillor Van Holst.
Okay, thank you, sir. We're not wasting any money by going to a pedestrian bridge. Okay, well that was my question. Although I do note that many times we have a park or something like this, a bridge where of course the local residents want to use it mostly for themselves. However, there are broader uses or broader benefits for the whole community, and that's the case with this bridge. Of course, it eases up on traffic in other places as well if it's still available to use, and probably used mostly by the local residents. But there's another one of those dichotomies or challenges we have to face. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Van Holst. I look to the committee or guests. Any further speakers?
Councillor Cassidy does have her hand up.
I saw it. Yep. Thanks, Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you. It is a challenge of chairing remotely, but I did see that I was on screen. So thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. I think this bridge in particular has had a lot of ups and downs, going open and closed and open and closed. And I think it is prudent to actually keep it in its current state, which is right now closed to vehicular or motorized vehicular traffic and open only to cyclists and pedestrians. I think it's prudent if we are going to do a review with the Ministry of Environment as required, to keep it the way it is for now, and then see what the review tells us. Things have changed because of the pandemic. Perhaps physical distancing measures aren't as important or in this case as they once were, but it is still quite important to maintain all of those safety features that we've put in place during the pandemic, despite the vaccination rates being as good as they are right now in Middlesex, London. People have really embraced our cycling paths, our walking trails, all of the opportunities that they have been provided throughout the pandemic to get out there and get moving. And I don't see people going away from that. I know for a long time, and it may still be the case, you could not buy a bicycle in the City of London because they were sold out. Everybody has really taken on this sort of outdoor activity en masse and with great enthusiasm. I think this is one particular area that is very well used and people really appreciate it. And it makes sense. It's nestled between two well-loved and well-used park areas as well. So I'm supportive of this motion, which is why I was happy to second it. I think, as always, we will get more information down the road, and it's important to get that information. But I don't like the idea of continuing to yo-yo this bridge, open to cars, now it's closed to cars, open to cars. Let's leave it the way it is for now and do the review that will be taking place.
Thanks, Councillor Cassidy. Look for any other comments or questions. Councillor Van Meerberg.
Thank you. I have to go back a couple of councils ago when this first came forward about the need to rebuild Blackfriars Bridge. At the time, bridge was carrying, as I recall, and perhaps staff can correct me if I'm off on this, but it was about 5,000 cars a day. This functioning vehicular bridge was and is quite important to the overall transportation system in London. To just arbitrarily keep it closed has unintended consequences in the larger arterials. I agree with the mayor. I think it makes sense that we come with some kind of balance here to allow vehicles as well as pedestrian traffic and bicycles. So I just want to mention that because I think sometimes it gets lost in terms of the overall perspective of what's transpired here with this bridge. And I do recall clearly at the time, a big component of the rationale to go forward with the rebuilding of this bridge was to keep it in operational shape for vehicles. So I will not be supporting this motion. And thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Van Meerberg. I think we've gone through everybody. Councillor Helmer has not yet spoken. Please.
Just a question through the chair to staff, just about the overall level of service for the road network going into downtown. I know that it's been pretty variable over the last 16, 17 months. We've also got the construction projects underway now, and then what will be happening next year. And I just wonder, in terms of trips into the core, what the overall level has been. Has it kind of returned back to normal, or is it a little bit below normal? And what does the future look like for next year in terms of access into the core along Riverside, or say taking Oxford and Talbot as a way to get in there? I know from the EA for Blackfriars that the majority of the trips that were using the bridge going eastbound into the core, most of them are coming from the north, coming down Western and cutting through Blackfriars to get into downtown. So there's obviously multiple ways to make that trip. It doesn't have to be across Blackfriars, but I wonder about the capacity of some of those intersections and how they've been performing sort of more recently, whatever data we've got, and how you think that might interact with the construction that's planned for next summer, because it'll be a bit different than last summer, but it'll still have a pretty big impact.
Mr. McCray.
Yeah, through the chair, so we have continued to monitor traffic volumes throughout the pandemic, and there are comparisons to pre-pandemic, which is 2019. Volumes across the city are typically 7-8% in recent weeks, lower than 7 or 8% lower than 2019. So still down slightly. We don't have it broken down really well to know how that plays out across the city, but we do sort of anecdotally feel that the trips into the core are reduced by more than that amount. So that's something we continue to monitor. With respect to trips into the core, yeah, you're correct in that a lot of the traffic does originate in the previous traffic across Blackfriars Bridge does originate in the northwest. So that is predominantly split between Oxford Street, and Riverside Drive. This past year, Riverside Drive has been constrained by the construction projects that were underway. Those are nearing completion. In particular, there's been significant backups on Riverside as a result of that having to be constrained down to one lane eastbound into the core. That will be reinstated to 2 lanes in the near future, and hopefully by next week. So that'll ease that condition. Looking towards next year, the downtown loop and core construction will predominantly impact Wellington Road and Queens Avenue. So more of an impact in the westbound direction. And so traffic flow from between the core from points west should generally be improved looking towards next year as a result of construction impacts.
Thanks, McRae. Councillor Helmer.
Yeah, so I mean, I can understand why staff brought forward, let's open up the eastbound lane again. I'm not convinced that now is really the time to do that. I think we've actually got some time yet before trips down into the core have come back to the level we were at before, where we had capacity problems at intersections. That eastbound trip, it's primarily a cut through trip, and for people who are making trips like that into the core, when they know that the bridge is not open, they'll just turn down Oxford and turn down Talbot, and those roads are much better suited for those kind of commuters making those trips than the skinny little Blackfriars Bridge in the middle of a residential neighborhood. And once Riverside goes back to 2 lanes into the core, I think that's going to provide a lot of extra capacity that has been missing. And I think it has been very tight, even with the reduced volumes of traffic into the core moving eastbound along Riverside. But that's no longer going to be the case in a matter of weeks when that lane opens back up. I think the actual construction projects that are planned for next year won't have the same kind of impacts on the eastbound traffic. And so I don't know that we necessarily have to open up Blackfriars 2 vehicles at this point. I see it as sort of a, open it up if absolutely necessary, but otherwise leave it for active transportation. And I think it's functioning really well right now as part of the active transportation network. So, I'm open-minded about it. I think it's proven to be an area where cars can travel safely through there eastbound. And in the past, when we've been really constrained in the road network, I have seen a need to have that open up so that we could have some trips going through that connection, but I'm not sure we're at that point right now. And I guess I'll keep listening to the arguments to see if there's a really compelling reason about why right now, but I'm not hearing it so far.
Thank you, Councillor Helmer. Look for any other comments. If not, if you might indulge me just to ask a question of staff from the chair. When Blackfriars was closed and for its reconstruction, it was reopened and there was a discussion about a couple things. One was eastbound versus westbound versus bidirectional. I think we landed on eastbound as a result of trying to avoid collisions at the bottom of the hill as they were coming down right out to turn onto Blackfriars for anybody heading westbound, as well as to provide opportunities for more mobility options, including a cycling lane. I think when we did that, if I recall the discussion, one of the reasons for opening it up to traffic at that time was to take capacity for the construction of the westbound leg, or the west leg of the BRT. The west leg of the BRT didn't proceed. And so the argument for having traffic on that bridge, which seemed to be predominantly based on that, I'm not sure if that's still as much of an issue. I think, as I recall during that discussion too, that once the Westlake BRT construction was completed, then there would be a renewed discussion about whether Blackfriars Bridge would be continued to be open to traffic or whether it would revert to a pedestrian bridge at that point. So perhaps to Mr. McCray, is my recall on that correct, or did I miss something?
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, so you are correct in that, yes, the environmental assessment did consider several different operational alternatives. And there's a lot of different factors considered, but yes, the conversion to one-way eastbound was a consideration of the width of the bridge. And you're correct in that there was also consideration of collision risk to the bridge for vehicles coming down the ride-out street side in inclement weather, winter weather, and potentially striking the bridge. That was identified from the structural engineers as a very real risk to the bridge. And then the other component was the directional split. So Councillor Van Meerbergen was correct in that the bridge prior had accommodated about 5,000 vehicles per day. But it's over half, slightly over half. So 3,000 of those were inbound, eastbound towards the core. So that was another sort of consideration in defining which operational setup made the most sense going forward. I don't specifically recall the link to the Rapid Transit West leg connection. That could have been part of the rationale. There was a lot of detailed considerations. Yeah, I can't confirm or, but that might have been part of it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McCray. I look for any other discussion. All right. We have a motion on the floor. It's been seconded. A lot of questions and discussions have ensued. So perhaps if there's no further comment, I will put the motion on the floor for vote. Okay, calling the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-2.
Thank you. And with that, I'll pass the chair back to the chair.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. That concludes, well, I'll look to committee to see if there's anything else for additional business that committee members would like to raise today. Seeing none, that would conclude the 14th meeting of the Civic Works Committee. I would need a motion to adjourn, moved by Councillor Turner, seconded by Councillor Van Meerbergen. A hand vote is adequate. All in favor of adjournment?
The motion carries 6-0.
Thank you and have a wonderful week.